Hello there, mind shakers.
Welcome to another episode of the Mindshack podcast.
This podcast has been developing and growing beyond our expectations.
And we would like to thank you for your continual support.
That's all. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
What's up, guys? Welcome to season 2 of the finale of the Mindshack podcast. Mindshack, as a reminder, is a Generation Z podcast that focuses on discussing societal issues, entrepreneurial leadership, and borders on topics in psychology for us Africans. Please check us out as usual on all relevant social media. That's at mind_shack_, particularly Instagram, where you get the most updates from our podcast. You can also find us on all podcast platforms, including our newest YouTube channel. And without further ado, let me get into our topic. Today's episode is kind of a special one. Today we're talking the 2020 recap, Africa edition. As a group, a Mindshack group with our guests in this episode, we're going to be sharing our opinions on the topic. It's a full house today, guys. We're going to be running this episode with no guests, but all hosts of the podcast. So in order to do this, I got partners in crime with me. I'm going to start with Rudo, just to say a whoop whoop.
Hey guys, how are you guys? Thank you, Jay. I'm excited. This is our last one for the season. We've come a long way, but I'm excited for this topic. It's jam-packed, like you said, so I'm ready.
Yeah, we're quite keen to end this on a big note. Kwezi is the other host with me.
What's good, guys? Hope you're doing well. I'm so happy to be doing this episode with my people. You know, my squad, the people I work the most with. Let's do this, man.
Okay, so in this episode, we're going to be talking about what a roller coaster 2020 was. And so this episode aimed to kind of reflect on the year we've had so far and try our best to put it in a positive attitude. So there are a couple of things to be discussing and trying to celebrate and notice in this year, apart from the things that have gone wrong. Because so much happened. A quick reflection reminder, I hate to do it, but just so we remember potentially and recognize also those that were lost, is the fact that last year we faced a bunch of things such as breakouts of murder hornets that happened in America. We got, at the beginning of the year, the death of Kobe Bryant, another sad one. And then the protests in a number of nations across a number of continents. And then that's not even mentioning the coronavirus outbreak. I mean, guys, Jack Ma has been missing since October, and no one's really talking about it. So Jack Ma, for those that don't know, is the pretty much most famous and popular entrepreneur and businessman in China over the past 10 years. So he's just been missing. No one's really talking about it. Another point is that there was a breakout of desert locusts that happened in Kenya. And then there was also the fires in Carolina and the Amazon. There's just a lot that happened in the year. So I'm not asking this coming question with that said, but it's more so just trying to leave that bit behind us and think about the positive things that are going to be covered in this episode and ask you two, Rudo and Kwezi, what's your one word for the year 2020 in Africa? As well as why do you think it's positive to look back at a year that has not gone as planned and take a look at these positives that fell part of the year?
Well, I can't help but to think of the word persistent. I think majority of us, leaders, individuals, businesses, students, we've really persisted and persevered, if I could say. Despite the challenges around us, we really said to ourselves, look, we're going to make it through, whether the pandemic likes it or not, or whether, people are dying around us or not, but at the same time, we're able to find some type of balance, I think we did a pretty good job as a world. Like, I feel like we could just give ourselves like a clap, because we did so well, in my opinion. We really broke through. We really came up to the top despite all the challenges that we faced as a world. Yeah, so I could say persistence and perseverance.
It is what it is. And let me tell you, in the beginning, maybe when the pandemic and all of those problems started in March, then I used to be really stressed out, sad. But more we continued the year, I just got used to it. When historical events happening left and right, it is what it is. Just live through it, try to make the best out of it. There have been some bad downs. We've all had bad moments throughout this year. That I have to acknowledge the good moments that were there at one point, Best part of the year was maybe Jan to February. March was okay. Half of March was okay. Then it all collapsed because a lot of bad things happened, and you can get drowned like in that environment where everything's going wrong. People are dying. People are losing their jobs. It's really toxic. So if you made it out, celebrate that. If you still have some family, if you have all your family, celebrate that. People around you, your loved ones, all of that.
Another major event that happened, a milestone for Africa, is that most countries celebrated either 50 years plus or 60 years on the dot of independence. So I just wanted to get a sense from you guys. Do you think that Africa is really independent, or do you think it's just we are independent on paper, but in reality we are not? So what are your thoughts on that, Jay?
I think it's quite true that when you look at the circumstances, you look at the issues that exist across the continent, it's kind of hard to say are we truly liberated. And so a part of it is like, yeah, we're liberated on paper and as things happened in all those years ago. But the damage kind of still lingers and remains. And so that's where part of the problem, that's where the problem of talking about being liberated is. Yeah, to some level, to answer your question, I would say it's hard to say truly that we are fully liberated. But at the same time, when you look back at the case in those 50 years ago, what the circumstance was, 40 years ago what the circumstance was, 30 years ago, 2010, and then now, you realize the pendulum is slowly swinging. And I would like to believe it's in a positive way. And I think it's also important for us young people to believe and think that.
You're right. I think having a pessimistic view at it won't really take us forward, but I think it also instills a critical aspect for us to actually, confront our realities and make people aware that, we actually need to be free. It's written on paper, but are we really free? And what can we do to become free for real this time, in my opinion?
I think also a part of it is the 21st century, 22nd century colonization that's happening, which is a part of the conversation that hasn't been had yet. Yeah, I feel like there's a new age and way of when you think of being liberated, you think of the colonization that happened in that time. But in this new age, there's a lot of talk and conversation about how colonization has actually changed and might still exist.
Yeah, exactly. But, it's 2021, so I'm trying to look at things positively, from a good angle, trying to make everything look better. So when I think about colonization or influence of the colonizers, I still think it exists, definitely. Some countries are still under the influence. Political leaders are still being, puppets of like Western states. But I also want to acknowledge the countries that are actually doing much better. So countries I personally have seen, so I've seen a difference. Countries like Mali, Burkina, were actually trying to create their own identity, not the one that was fabricated by the French colonizer in this situation, because I'm a French speaker, so I know more about that situation. Companies from Mali are actually exploiting their resources kind of now. Burkina is doing really well, a true success story actually, when you talk about one of the great democracies in Africa. I want to congratulate those two countries specifically. They are doing way better. You can see the difference even in how people talk about their own country,
Just highlighting one thing that I think has not changed from, 60 years ago and today, I would say is the military power or law enforcement, if I could say. I think I've been taught all my life that the military should be above everyone, basically. They have so much power and they hold so much power, and it's been said so many times that, once the military can take over, it's like over for most countries, because they actually hold the power. But what's your guys' opinion on that very same power? Do you think it should be taken away from them? Because looking at the protests, some authorities can overstep boundaries and actually harm people's lives and really impact people harshly. So what are your thoughts around police brutality in that sense, especially regarding all the protests that have happened in this year?
My opinion on this topic is pretty basic. The only African state that I know who is controlled by law enforcement is Rwanda, and it is a success. Other countries We've seen dictators, so those who were like what, military generals and all, take power. It was a failure. Look at countries like Nigeria, Buhari, president of Nigeria. You can see it can turn so badly because of their aggressiveness, you know?
I agree fully. So what are we saying about power? Is it in the wrong people's hands? Because I think if I were to give an answer, I would say that. I would say the power is okay, the authority is okay. It's just that it's in the wrong people's hands currently. Because if I as a leader can make a decision, an informed decision, and tell the military to just go shoot to kill, for instance, which has been said by an African leader, by the way, just shoot to kill. I believe that's very irresponsible, especially as a leader and knowing that you're supposed to protect people's lives. But, I think our perspective around police has shifted. And that's why I said it's something that has not changed from like centuries back, because there's still some type of fear that we have towards police. And I feel like they're supposed to be a safeguard for us. They're supposed to be people that we run to for safety and know that we can find refuge in them. But instead, we fear them. Instead, when we approach them, there's a high chance that we might be killed, especially as Black men, So what's your perspective as a Black man, Mr. Jean-Claude?
Right now, we're going to a quick break. This break is one to say thank you. Thank you to you, our listener, for your feedback, for engaging with our podcast on our various social media as we work to improve and incorporate it. We urge you to continue to do so as we set sail. Thank you very much. We hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. As a Black person, it also just depends the environment you're currently in. It's funny in this conversation, this is all happening all over the world, pretty much. And the movement with Black people particularly, where in this case is occurring, is slightly different when you look at the context of the environments that it's happening in. And so I just want to, before I continue that point, talk about the law enforcement section as a whole, to define what law enforcement stands for, the proper role of law enforcement. Law enforcement is basically put in place in order to promote public safety and uphold the rule of law so that individual liberty can flourish. People can be themselves in their community to promote safety in the community. So as time has gone, it's kind of it feels like a balance, and that's where your question is tilting on, a balance of how much power law enforcement exists with and basically how they use the information that they gain, because I feel that's part of the problem. As time has gone, they look back at a track record of who are the people that have caused the most problems or who statistically is more likely to cause an issue. And that kind of doesn't go back to a deeper check of how the laws that have first been put in place have caused those individuals to have a shadowy eye on them, and therefore cause them to be more likely to act out, to react, because they're being prejudiced, they're being put in a specific box. As a Black person, you walk around kind of looking over your back at times, and you feel like you have to act 10 times more. I've been in a scenario where I'm in front of police, and then I feel like I need to speak and act a certain way in order not to be profiled and have a difficult conversation with this police officer. So the position it's at right now is really critical on a Black person. And it takes time for that to swing, because it's fundamental in the psychology, in the way that people think of Black people. And it brings the conversation of centralized law enforcement or decentralized law enforcement. Decentralized law enforcement basically says in each region, potentially within a country, it's kind of under its own accord with preferences of regional citizens, opposed to one law and one literally going over all borders, jurisdictional law enforcement, which could aim to be a better way of law enforcement. With that said, let's start to step back a bit here. Let's start to think about, independence, start to think about 2020, and let's start to think about other things that have happened and the effects of parties and stakeholders within trying to move things forward and improve the economies we live in, the world we live in, outside of the particular conversation of law enforcement and or basically laws around the country. Let's talk about within my part of the conversation that I mentioned in the beginning, how colonization has slightly changed. Let's just ponder on that moment for a bit with the question I want to pose in that, because we see allies, right? We see other countries as, especially for Africa, the potential that we have kind of stepping in and looking like they are allies and looking like allies are the important way for us to come out of the issues we exist in. I want to pose the question, are we supposed to see China specifically as an ally or just a 21st century colonizer? Kwezi, I'm going to swing that over to you to start.
You know, I'm all about learning from your mistakes. So, the colonizers first started as they just wanted to educate us, help us. They thought they were enlightening us, And I feel like that's what China is trying to do. Gain more influence on the world, since they're fighting for that superpower position with the US. And we're just another, let's say, a pawn or like a move. They want to control Africa. And you know what stresses me out the most with China is the amount they're investing in Africa. It's just loans countries won't ever be able to pay back, and therefore China will probably get what's it called rights to operate the what's it called, the mine or the train track. I'd be really careful. You don't want a new colonizer, especially one like China with trillions of dollars. You never know how they move. I'd be careful. I wouldn't see them as an enemy at all, or a colonizer yet, but an ally would be stretching it,
Yeah, I agree with you guys 100%. I think it's very hard to find someone who does not know your struggle completely as a partner or as an ally in this case. I think they are a 21st century colonizer, if I can put it in your terms, JC. I think they're just allowing us to have more sophisticated conversations over how they are going to take over. And, they're no longer taking it forcefully, They're just allowing us to wear suits and negotiate how they're going to basically exploit from us, if I could put it that bluntly. But I'm not against partnerships. I'm not against learning from other nations. But if we are saying we are partnering with people, I believe it should be with people who know or have been through a similar struggle as we have been.
I think part of that conversation is the fact that there's this, I'm putting air quotations, mutual relationship, mutual benefiting relationship for the two continents / country, if you want to call it. And yeah, I mean, in some nature, you actually can look at some of the statistics and see that there is growth that Africa has at least received from this trade between China, which is called the PRC trade. And so, it's quite interesting to more monitor the small things that are sort of monitor each trade and why that's happening, in order to kind of educate yourself in what's happening there. The Africa-China relation is a big relation, one of the biggest across the entire world. And so where that relation is taking us, as all Africans, we should know this. And China played a good part, because we also in Africa had the African Continental Free Trade Agreements that happened in China in some way plays to leverage from that. So it's an interesting thing and needs more kind of delving into understanding and getting into the information of it.
I was talking to the editor of the podcast, Ronnie. So he's the one that edits. Hi, Ronnie. And we talked about, do you think some countries in Africa need a dictatorship? Maybe, I don't know if back in the 1940s and all, they had this term called the strong man or woman. Yeah. So do you guys believe that maybe Africa should have that, a powerful leader that controls the country, from bottom to the top, makes the rules, applies them, think countries who have been plagued with corrupt leaders and all of them, you think that would be a good solution?
I think having a strong man really does put things in order. I won't even deny that fact. It does make things more straightforward, and there's less communication and there's less opinions, and things tend to get done faster and more efficiently in a dictatorship, or quote, when there is a strong man. There are pros and cons to it. If we look back in history, if you look at your Stalins, Muhammad Gaddafi, people who wanted to implement such systems. But if I could put it in the most simplest form, I think it would bring progress, fast progress. Shutting out conversations, shutting out opinions would bring in fast progress. Is that what we need right now? Or do we need things that are going to be sustainable? And for me, sustainability includes conversations. It includes, us checking things, trial and error, So I think we don't really need a strong man if we want to be sustainable, in my opinion.
One thing is that we need to kind of go across the continent and ask the question, how many people actually know what a democracy is and how it affects them? I feel that's part of the problem. There's a lack of education and understanding of how a democracy works in these different countries. And having a dictatorship and or kind of breaking away the borders and to think also it starts with breaking away the borders, and it starts with taking on individual social issues and challenges that we have within our countries before just jumping to a dictatorship type style where it's like a China. In that sense, I feel like it's a tricky ask. There's steps to it, and in order for us to get to a position where we feel like Africa can run under a dictatorship, people need to understand what it means to live in a country that they're in right now under the current political system that they have right now, and how it's affecting them. Know more about the political system. In South Africa, we have the case where one political party has been in power for many years, and it's because that political party is the one that liberated us from what we had as apartheid, which separated black people of color basically, and marginalized them. And so we've since then, as black people, decided there's only one party to vote for, because if we vote for any other party, we're at risk of going back to what we had before, the apartheid situation. And yeah, for that reason, people are not they don't have their understanding, their own personal relationship and understanding of the democracy and how their vote plays a part in impacting their scenario and situation. And in that sense, I feel we need to start there. More people need to be educated and equipped on it in order for us to then shift to what might become a dictatorship. Seeing that a dictatorship might be positive.
I absolutely agree, especially when you start to speak about South Africa and apartheid. But I just can throw in an opinion there is that I think a democracy for most Black South Africans is something, it's like a taste of freedom. Because I could say, rightfully so, that apartheid was some sort of dictatorship, actually. It was. But so democracy is it's like a taste of freedom. So taking away democracy for South Africans, particularly in this case, would be like bringing back apartheid, which was dictatorship. So my main question is, are we ready to explore different political systems as a nation, as Africa? Because I think most people have the same traumas. But, I think the more we study, the more we look into it, I think even new political systems can be designed. I feel like we don't always need to refer to the ones that have worked or not worked. I think as a youth, we should actually look into designing new political systems that will work for different regions. I mean, why can't we combine dictatorship, like an aspect of it, with democracy, or design a whole new system? I feel like as much we've been studying all these things for so long, I think it's time that we start developing new political systems that are perfectly designed for certain regions. Yeah, so that's my take on it. But I think looking at it, or I think health above everything is what we realized is the true wealth of this world. And, considering that we had a COVID-19 outbreak and pandemic as the whole world, what do you think this highlighted about our health system in Africa particularly? Do you think we did a good job as Africans? I can just throw in there, Senegal did a great job, in my opinion. Was one of the first African countries that stepped up and said that they have, like a remedy, cure for it, or they were prioritizing testing, in the very beginning and early stages of this pandemic. So what have you guys taken from the pandemic and how the health system of Africa works?
It's interesting how with this whole COVID-19 situation, we've all become professors at analyzing our health systems and the COVID-19 effects, etc. I like this question because, it draws on speaking about what we didn't know was an issue before, and it reminds me of Bill Gates' talk on TEDx when he spoke about how the health system or a pandemic like this is going to affect the health system, and that's pretty much what happened, and how he got to know that information is a conversation for another day. But COVID-19 has highlighted the terrifying health systems, and I also, to another effect in the question, would also say to some extent showed that we are better off than we thought we were too, because I'm sitting in a country currently in Johannesburg, South Africa, sitting in a country where we are at a turmoil when it comes to the coronavirus right now, but at the same time, there are social issues that exist, but when you look at Africa, it's not only talking about regions or specific areas, but we're looking at it as a whole. And apart from us in South Africa, I feel the African continent has not necessarily had the health system that can take care of it, but somehow managed to bring together, in some cases, good laws and decision making in order to limit the effect of the coronavirus across the continent, and allowed us to take a step back and see where the issues are in a case where this didn't happen and the health system was directly affected. How it's important for us to, from the other countries that have been affected on a high scale.
My opinion on it is that we did way better than what people thought we were gonna do. I don't know if you guys remember, but way back in April, May, when it was really ravaging Europe, Belgium, Italy, all of those countries, people were saying, oh, look at what it's doing to all these developed Western countries. Africa is doomed. We're done. This is the end of the continent. Everyone's gonna die. But here we are today. All three of us are here, right? All our residents in Africa. So I'm pretty proud of all, as Rudo said, countries like Senegal, even Gabon, Kenya, SA, countries that are actually trying to test multiple, like, peoples in the thousands. So you can say, our health system wasn't ready at all. Definitely, it's not up to par to what it should be. But we did way better than what people had expected of us.
So with that said, I'll thank you for listening. I'll thank Rudo and Kwezi for joining us today.
Wow, you listened through to the end? Thank you.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at mind_shack_.
And if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform or all of them.
There's going to be more exciting episodes to come.
So, see you on the next one.